So, Alex, what are your thoughts on in terms of it being a good fit? And as I say, we're talking about not just in terms of the playing squad, but the culture and what Spurs are currently looking at as a club.
Yeah, I think it ticks all the nearly all of the boxes. So cultural fit, I think you're right. Like, as we spoke about before, he's coming in to maybe what seems like a tricky environment actually at the right time, and he's probably the right fit for it. He should be in like a nice face around the ground, and like as we've spoken about as well, as Chris spoke about, like good with working with young players, and Tottenham have a very young squad. So, and also I think on the playing side too, you know, there is a lot of debate about what Frank exactly will do, but I do think there was a nice like potential fit. So I think Frank, for example, I think it's quite clear he's going to play inside forwards because he likes to have his wingers be goal scorers. And you've got Matisse Tell, who that is probably the only role I back him to reach the top level. I'm not sure he was going to work out as a winger or a striker. So playing him as like an inside forward, I think that's quite nice. Same with Brennan Johnson as well. The man who only scores goals and does nothing else. That should probably suit him too, that inside forward role. The only area I'm like, it goes back to what I was talking about before. It's like the stylistic shift where I looked at the numbers beforehand. I think Brentford won around 51 or 52% of their ground and aerial duels last season, whereas Tottenham were around 47, 46%. And Brentford obviously play quite direct, but I do think that speaks to the fact that Brentford, they're an older side too under Frank, and you know they're more capable of winning duels. And I think that is important because you know Postecoglou faced a lot of counter-attacks at Tottenham, but that generally came from pressing extremely high and playing playing an extremely fast way. But I think those counter-attacks were more pressure on the defense to like race back and defending like counter-attacks on the ground, let's say. Whereas I think with Frank, his teams tend to be a bit more transitional. He tends to try and create like situations where his team can go and play direct and win their duels, and in the same way defend like direct balls. So winning duels, I think, is going to be a big importance to him. So again, coming back to that point of winners and losers, like in terms of a good fit for Spurs and the squad, I think this is the question mark I have is what do you do with players like Bergvall, for example, who is still very young, can still be shifted around by like physically dominant players in the Premier League. That does he suddenly not play as many minutes because he's not like yet ready to play like all the time under Frank? If Tottenham are going to play a direct style, let's say, and that might be the case for other youngsters too. Like I said, I think Brentford had an older squad, and the one youngster that Frank always picked up was Yama Yamaluk. And he rarely got starts at Brentford last season, if I'm not mistaken. Like it took quite a while, at least, for him to get properly into the team. So what Frank clearly does like working with youngsters, I think those youngsters tend to be like early 20s, or like 23, 24 years old. I'm not sure what his attitude is going to be to like the group of like 19, 20-year-olds Tottenham have on their books.
That's exactly my concerns. And it was a concern that I said that because obviously Brentford have a very unique way of developing youngsters in terms of their academy. They don't have an academy, and it was exactly what I said on another podcast that was one of my concerns. And it was no, but Denmark. He's worked at youth level for Denmark, and I'm like, and he's also brought for loads of youth at Brentford, and I'm like, yeah, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. Mikey Moore's 17, and the way that you push through a 17-year-old is completely different to how you do a 20, 22-year-old. Do you know what I mean? So that is actually one of my concerns. I do agree. I think that he will, from a coaching aspect, I've never had concerns. From a personality aspect, I've never had concerns. However, when you want to get your young players to a certain standard in terms of the 17, 18-year-old, there's a different way of managing them. So that has been one of my concerns.
Especially, I was going to say as well, like, especially since Ange like relied so heavily on these youngsters, like he blooded them so much, right? So how are Tottenham fans going to react if they're saying Mikey Moore doesn't go out on loan? Like, may I say as well, I've not been to many games live, but Mikey Moore's the most talented player I've ever seen live play football. Like, you can probably guess the game I watched him play in. But
to be fair, there has been quite a few of them where he's just looked levels above, which is ridiculous.
It was the one where Madison called him Neymar against AZ Alkmaar. The start of that second half was unbelievable watching. Went with some friends watching the South Stand. But my point is, right, Mikey Moore, phenomenally talented player. Let's say he doesn't go out on loan. How do Spurs fans react if Frank gives him less minutes than Postecoglou did, despite him being a year older, right? It's like, what's going on here? But you're right, Frank might have a very different approach.
So again, I'm not sure, but I was very much Postecoglou in, and I wanted, that was how my journey into YouTube was very much, I had a different opinion to a lot of the fan base, and that was kind of where people were getting me on their pods, and they were saying, look, you've got a different opinion, can you come on? And I always said that I think we should stick with him, and I could completely understand where the others were coming from in terms of league form and etc. But one thing that is continually stabbed at him is that he's underused Mikey Moore, and I'm like, Mikey Moore has played 20 games as a 17-year-old in the Premier League, or in all competitions, whatever that may be. Not many 17-year-olds do that. And if you're going to compare him to Yamal, football is not something you should be talking about, because Yamal is just generational. It's just so. Yeah, in terms of it's just ridiculous. He's the fact he's 17 is just crazy. But I can very much see a world where if Ange was still here, Mikey Moore probably would have played less minutes, and I think that a lot of people would have got on his back. However, Mikey Moore has come out, and there's quite a lot of people that are close within Spurs, and Mikey Moore's actually stated that he's very, very happy with the amount of minutes that he's played and the amount of games. He didn't think he'd play that much. But it will be interesting, as you've just said, next year, if he plays less, whether people are, because these people were Ange out from well before that he went, it'd be very interesting to see whether them same people are saying the same thing, given that Mikey Moore is that year older. Now, hopefully, he doesn't have the serious injury, which it looked like he potentially picked up recently for the England under 19s, I think it was. He looked like he went off with a serious ankle injury, he was crying and everything else. I'm hoping that isn't anything big and that he can start the season fit. But that will be very, very interesting to see whether or not he will feature that much next year.